Record.
Dawn, we always miss you when you're not here. And every time I hit record, we think of you.
Thank you.
So today we are share screen.
I don't have a bookmark today. Normally I look at you to see, but you have a lot of pages on this side. So I'm going to start over here. Looks like you're split.
See, I also use the index. I don't know my way around that well.
Oh, me either.
So in Sunday school, it was the truth, the light, and the way, but there's a song and it starts John, I don't know, 10:5 or whatever that verse was. And then they sing about it. So for the kids, I was like, what are we learning about today? They hit a background. And Henry said, is 10:5 military time? I was like, no, let's get a Bible. So I was like, what a perfect time.
Yeah.
And they had a word search, just the words from the thing. And so I'm like looking for it. Eleanor was like, it's like you have your own word search. And I'm like, kind of is like a word search. But it was fun because
I love that.
Not that great. They know it now, but it was like a perfect time to introduce the concept.
Yeah, when they're interested.
Right.
Yeah, I love that.
Good job. Awesome. Thank you for doing that, because I think that is one of those things that when we've talked about goals for Sunday school, knowing how to navigate a Bible would certainly be one of them for me.
Yeah.
All right. So I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, we are at the start of chapter 2. That is where we left off. And a natural first breaking point is at the verses 1 through 11. So I think we will start there, and then if we decide we have time to read a second section, we can do that. But let's begin with this one, which funny that you bring up a song, because this one includes a song. So is there someone who would be willing to read verses 1 through 11?
I can do it.
Thank you.
So I'm reading the NIV. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one of mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of the others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus, who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, and that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father.
Thank you, Charity. So let's run this first portion of the chapter. Anything interesting or stick out?
Don't have ulterior motives for helping people. Do it out of the goodness of your heart.
That is certainly a good takeaway from this. As evident from our prayers earlier, it's a lesson that many people in our world today can use that lesson.
I think I brought it up before, and I've seen it on social media, but I don't know if the teacher's a rabbi or a Buddhist or whatever, but somebody said, great teacher, why did God make atheists? He said, because atheists do things because they're the right thing to do and for no reason other than that. And that's something for all of us to learn from. Not that heaven and doing is, I mean, we're doing as God taught us, whether we realize it or not. Don't do the wrong stuff and for the wrong reasons. It's not about you. It's doing, even when you give yourself something, it benefits all, or should, do for all.
And so I think what's interesting is it seems like how we're reading this is everyone everywhere should be of one spirit and one mind. Is that's what you're saying? Like the good things that we do as Christians are good whether we're Christians or not. That's kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
So what's interesting is when Paul was writing this, he was writing more about interpersonal conflict within the community. There were fights happening within the community at Philippi, and he's basically saying, if you want to make this work, if we're going to be able to maintain this community, we all need to be of one mind and of one love and stick together, because it's hard out there.
I think from listening to what you're saying, so then you have Christians. That didn't last. And then you had this branch of Christians and this branch of Christians. And then those branches broke out into branches because as a whole, we can't agree and make it work. That's why Martin Luther, I don't agree with that. Here we are. The Episcopals, King, whatever, I want this, which I should know off the top of my head, whatever. We're going to break off and we're going to go over here. So we never made it work together. We made it work by separating.
Yes, but there are times when we have come back together. For example, the Episcopal Church and the ELCA Lutheran Church are in what's called full communion with one another. So we have agreed that we believe essentially the same things. So we're even allowed to swap ministers if we want.
But why wouldn't we come together to be one religion?
It's because of sentimentality, largely.
Who gives up their title?
People like their church and people like the words of their worship, but we all agree that we believe the same thing. And there is... So people talk about the idea of America being a melting pot. And there's actually kind of a negative to that image, because the idea of a melting pot is that it becomes homogenous. All of the diversity is lost in it. And so I've heard now they're teaching kids America's like a chopped salad, where
I've heard
the ingredients are still retain their uniqueness, but they work together and they make something even better. And so I think in the best possible light, the coming together of different denominations is that we're retaining the different avenues for finding God that make us unique, but working together at that because we recognize that it's the same God that we're trying to approach.
I like that.
I think this early church where they sort of put all their resources together and took care of each other and lived in this sort of communal, not having self-interest way. I mean, it's so ideal and it's so flawed. And because we're not Paul, we just don't, it's reminding me of a Grateful Dead lyric. So the Grateful Dead, I don't know if you know anything, but people really tried to do this, sincerely. And there's a lyric, so I don't think it's too off color, but it says, "We can share the women, we can share the wine, we can share what we've got of yours, because we done shared all of mine." Meaning if we're all trying to put, women as resources is kind of problematic, but if we're all trying to live communally and share, it's only going to work if you actually all do it.
Yeah.
We've done shared all of mine. I gave you everything. No, it's just gone. And I think everyone who tries to do this, probably even in the early church, I gave you all my resources. I didn't look out for my own interests. And then you're sitting there without anything to eat because no one did that back.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think today we would say that's a cult. Now, granted,
well, if you can, cult if you're allowed to leave freely,
Right.
Right. I think it can be a communal way of living.
But we're
Cults
all-
kind of don't let you
Yeah.
do that. But
And there are intentional communities. I have some friends who lived in some where it's everybody pulls their groceries and everybody takes turns with the cleaning and the cooking, and there are people who live that way.
like I grew up in upstate New York, and there's a ton of people who started these little communities, and everybody got cold and hungry, and they don't work
Is
because
that
we're not. This isn't who we. I mean, maybe we could be, but it's hard. It goes against basic human nature, I think.
Is that what a commune would be?
Yeah,
That kind of
living communally.
Yeah.
That's where they get the name. Yeah.
So what would be, so ideally that sounds great. And I'm asking, I'm not getting into, but like socialism or Russia, the idea of everybody, you get so many coupons, it doesn't work. We found that it didn't work. But no, a commune is different. It's not socialism on a national scale or anything.
You're not required by law to be in it.
Right.
Yeah.
Big difference.
Right.
But how do we like downscale it and say, no, this could work?
Well, I feel like that's what Paul's getting at. Like if we really were united with Christ, if we really gave up our ego, if we really lived in humility and didn't have self-interest, then everyone's needs would be met and it would be wonderful.
I think that's idealistic, though. I think people have tried that.
Saying.
No, I think that's
the
what
early
saying.
church.
And I think the idea in the early church, we have to look to the early church, because I'm definitely devil's advocating myself. Don't get me wrong. I'm fully aware that's what I'm doing.
Right.
The early church, what the resources were are not what they are now. What is your goal? Food, clothing.
But there are some ways in which it would have been even harder to do this sort of thing in this society than in our society, because so much of what society was based on under Roman rule is they call it an honor shame culture. So much of your value as a person is based on how others perceive how honorable you are. And so this idea where it says in humility value others above yourselves is even more radical to them than it appears to us.
Okay.
So it wasn't easy then either.
They didn't have the Grateful Dead.
I know they didn't have the benefit of the Grateful Dead.
They never had the Grateful Dead. So this is radical. It's crazy. It's crazy. But it's pretty cool if it would work.
It is.
And there are small times and small pockets where it does. One of my favorite examples of those is, Jackie, are you familiar with the Catholic worker movement? So started by Dorothy Day in the early 20th century.
So I know that name.
Low income Catholic working class people living together in community, sharing what they have. There are Catholic worker houses that still exist. And people live together and share what they have. And it's, small, maybe 15, 20 people, but they make it work.
But see, I think the key for it working is it's lower income people coming into it. So at this point, you and I both have seniors in high school. We're going to college. Sophie's going to start at JJC. Hope is starting
U of I.
U of I. U of I costs a lot more money.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with that. But so instead of her going to U of I, you need to give me part of that money. And they can both then go to ISU.
I know, right?
That doesn't, do you know what I'm saying? Like,
no, I know.
I think when you start throwing in kids or people not at the lower class who already have their sights above that, it's where it gets tricky.
When you giving up,
and granted, I could care less if Hope is going there, and just like
that's why I just got a job.
I was going to say that has nothing to do with anything.
But just that I think if you're above subsistence, as soon as there gets to be But in the early church, there was status. There were wealthy people giving up their money for this. I don't know. Also, interpersonal dynamics will mess these things up pretty quickly, especially if two people like the same lady, those kinds of things.
Later on in this epistle, we'll hear about two women who have an argument.
No, I mean, I just think he's setting up this idea that this could work, and I wish it did better. That's all.
I love the idea of it. There's a college in Tennessee, and I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but I've been there before. Not for school. I don't know, we were in Tennessee, and that's kind of stuff my mom likes to go visit. Tuition is free.
Yeah.
You work.
Right.
For the university to build and you put in this many hours, but it's free. You don't have to be a state student. You don't have to be, it's got a completely different model. And it works there.
Yeah.
But there's got to be other colleges.
Colleges are having a really hard time just staying in business right now because they've lost international students and they've lost all the funding. So like my college I went to is probably going to close this year. It's just
because we went more liberal.
Which was a small liberal arts place. Yeah, but it's tough. It's really tough right now because the professors don't want to be paid in student hourly workers.
No, because I know ISU
it's just hard right
faculty went on strike earlier this year. And the strike had ended, but you've got professors going on strike. You've got, and the cost of tuition, you can't keep raising tuition.
They can.
Well,
they will. Yeah.
It just will. Anyway, that's okay. Let's see what Paul has to say about how this is all falling apart in the early church. And then we can talk about how it's all falling apart. Maybe we need a Paul.
I will. Oh, sorry,
David.
I just wanted to say about verse 3. Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility regard others as better than yourselves. I think we have to look at that carefully in context. That's a kind of Christianity that a lot of people grow up with. It really goes hand in hand with worm theology, I guess. But the idea that you shouldn't think of yourself, you shouldn't value yourself, that the idea that other people are better than you are, and you need to live your life in that way, which a lot of people struggle with that part too, that they don't sufficiently indulge in self-care because they're more concerned about others, that they think that they're not of that much value. And so they struggle with self-esteem. Sometimes some people, before they can make any steps forward, before they can help others effectively, they need to learn to care for themselves and love themselves as well. So we have to take a look at the example that it's Jesus, I guess. And he understood who he was. But even understanding who he was, there's a phrase they used to use in more kind of charismatic circles. We're all king's kids, but realizing who we are, that enables us to humble ourselves and become servants, even if it means that it'll cost us our very lives in order to serve those sometimes that don't appreciate our service or those who want to kill us. But it's a difficult thing to work to line to make sure we're right where we need to be, because I know a lot of people with poor self-image. I guess you could argue there are some psychological aspects in which this is kind of the understanding that we're always going to think of ourselves, so we need to emphasize the other way. But anyway, I think more importantly is we need to understand who we are because of what Jesus did and how God regards us. And then we can begin to consider others and reach out to them. But anyway, that was just.
I think that's a very good point, David. And I think that's another reason why it's always important to remember, especially with the epistles, the context in which they are written. And so they were being written to address a problem of people who had a very high opinion of themselves. And so this was meant as a corrective. It's not something that someone who has a very low opinion of themselves should maybe be focusing on in their faith.
I have to remind myself when I see somebody on the television and I really don't like them and I want to say, something nasty about them, I have to remember that God loves that person just as much as he loves me.
This word in verse 4, again, this word scopeo, which look to the interests of others, literally means to aim, and that's another one of those Stoic words that is used in Stoicism, and it's another way in which Paul is adapting the terminology of Stoicism here and relating it to the people around in that culture. As Brian was saying, being a military culture, there was probably a good few Stoics there, and understanding the concept of making your aim to your purpose, to look to the interests of others and not just your own interests, your selfish, self-centered interests.
I wonder if because the military is so hierarchical, that this was also sort of saying, like, in Christ we're equal. Like, we're not going to have, officers and enlisted. We're not going to have all these ranks. I wonder if the military nature of the population was leading to some, like, hierarchies in the church that were causing problems.
I could definitely see that becoming an issue.
So maybe that's part of this, let's live in a commune vibe he's got going.
That's a good idea. Being married to a former Marine, just so you probably saw a little bit of that. So that's a good insight. I like that.
I was actually thinking about you and Leslie. You're comparing your service to each other's.
Yeah, well, I was we had kind of an interesting relationship because she was the one that was more she was much more complementarian than I was. I was much more egal than she was because I grew up Nazarene. We had women preachers right from the very beginning, so we had kind of a flip thing. I had to straighten her out that I wasn't going to tell her what to do. No.
He was really good.
Ignore it. Yeah. No. Anyway. But
I gotten involved into a very, very conservative group of people, and David did. In our family, we're equal. We're not. Neither one of us is in charge of the other person. So, so it's good.
I just love the idea of a man, pushing for egalitarianism. It's funny.
I've seen it though. I think sometimes women raised in those churches are much more hesitant than men to try to step out of their role. There's a lot of I'm sure David's seen it too, but yeah, definitely have friends raised in patriarchal religions, and the idea that you would take a role outside of your predetermined gender role is terrifying.
What did somebody tell me? Well, Jesus is the head of the church, man is head of the family.
Yeah.
I was involved in the bill.
In the context, though, I think they're not talking about authority. Headship doesn't refer to authority. They're talking about origin and the fact that this whole thing that Paul is saying in this instance, that particular instance, is bringing a whole new concept that husbands are supposed to love their wives as Jesus loved the church.
Radical stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, no, I should do what my husband tells me because Jesus told us. Isn't that how it should be?
Well, if you just pick out the lines about obedience, and you'd miss all the ones about love, you get a different, you get a different vibe. But right, do we want to get through?
I was just going to say a couple things about the hymn part of it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Not that we get sidetracked.
That's okay. No, this has been great
There's a
discussion.
lot to say.
And if we only get through these first 11 verses, that's also okay. We're not in a hurry. But I did want to point out that there is so this is clearly a piece of poetry or a song that has been included in this text. There are some who believe that it was in a commonly known hymn or poem of the time that Paul was quoting. But there are a lot of scholars who note that the words that are used are very similar to other words that Paul used in other places. So it's believed that it's fairly likely that it could have just been something that he composed himself. Especially one source that I was reading talks about in Colossians, Paul tells people to teach one another through psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit. So this may have been an example of him doing just that. And one other thing that I wanted to mention is, I don't know if anyone ever notices, I always bow, a little bow whenever I say Jesus during church on Sundays, and that is because of this verse. At the name of Jesus, every knee should bow.
Oh, interesting.
And so at the name of Jesus, I always give a little bow.
I've noticed it, but
I like to explain the weird little things that I do when they come up.
I had no idea why.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that helps us. It's just that this whole hymn, or however you want to look at it, though, it's not predicated on the fact that he's the Son of God, that he receives all this, but it's predicated on the fact that he humbled himself and became a servant, was obedient to death, the cross. That's how he expressed his love. That's why he is owed that allegiance. It's not that he could by right or authority just would be took charge and told people what to do and ruled them with authority. But yeah, this is a lovely hymn, and I really appreciate it. It's very, very important.
And it's teaching the same lesson that we were talking about above, where it's there are people who were saying they are better for some reason or more important for some reason, and it's no, we all agree that Jesus is the most important. He's the reason we're here, and yet he's the one who humbled himself. But yeah, so just wanted to call attention. Didn't want us to focus only on the first part, because this is a lovely piece of this epistle, and I think it's worth spending a little time on. Right. Do we want to do another? Well, it would be 12 to 18. Do we want to do that today, or do we want to just kind of wrap up our conversation with these first 11 verses?
I'm good either way.
I'm comfortable with not going on to another one, especially if we want to do a little more thinking about that hymn. That was because I think we need to make sure we do that a lot of justice, because that's the basis of the distinction of Christianity. I think
I'd like to spend time on it too.
All right.
Yeah, that's the advantage of we're not doing this during Lent, so we're not trying to stick to a schedule, so we can focus where we'd like to.
I had a thought about what David was saying about how, like, humbling yourself and like treating other people like they're better than you, that part of it. But people can do it. If you have bad self-esteem and you're told to do this, like, it's not coming out of the same place. And I think, like, the hymn talks a lot about how Jesus did that knowing that he had equality with God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he knew he had equality with God, and he knew that inside himself. And then he made this decision to be like, to act like sort of less than he was, right? And I think that's very different than thinking you're less than and acting accordingly, right? To know, like, I think there's a really big difference if service comes from, like, I feel very confident in myself and I feel like I can provide service without it hurting me, versus I'm just, downtrodden or somehow in a position in a bad side of the power differential and need to do this, or I'm told to do this. So I just feel like same act, but coming out of very different motivations. And I just thought they had made it pretty clear which one should be modeled. I don't know. Is that what you're getting at, David? Or
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I was trying to say, that we have to model the model has to be Jesus and where he was coming from. But in order to get to that model, people have to realize that they have value because of who they are. That their self-esteem, a lot of people struggle with self-esteem. They don't realize that. And if you don't realize who you are because of the love of God, because of the love of Jesus, because of who we are, then you can take these kind of verses and you can apply them in a rather harmful, self-harmful way. Where no churches, for example, that take these kind of teachings like themselves and they teach women that they are not supposed to have any real worth, that if they're being beaten or if they're being mistreated at home, they need to be Christian and just take that. And in order to help their husbands and make their husbands maybe come to Jesus in the right way, they need to just, take the beatings and consider themselves, less than, and consider him better than himself. So I'm just saying that we have to be careful that we use the example of Jesus in the whole context and understand that we're not innately, less than, because that can be very harmful to people. Are we talking the same thing, Charity? Are we on the same page?
yeah, I think too. I think you're talking about we shouldn't tell people they're less than and expect it of them. And I'm thinking also the people reading this to know that service should come out of a place of wholeness.
Yes, and that's my concern, because sometimes these passages can be used the wrong way.
On that note, Charity, I don't love the I think this is the NIV that's up here, which is the same one that you read. Verse 7, it says he made himself nothing. But in the NRSV, which I have here, it's he emptied himself. And it's making me think about when with the caregivers group, we've talked about not being able to pour from an empty cup.
Right.
So to be able to empty yourself, you've got to have something in there to start with.
Just do it sustainably.
Mine says, but made himself of no reputation.
Interesting.
That is interesting. I've never heard that translation of it before.
That's the one thing that I like about this Bible study, that it's not that we all use the same Bible. I understand the benefit of everybody's reading the same, but I like the different.
And the word here, actually in the Greek, is he made taking the form of a doulos, which means a slave, literally. And in that context, that culture, when you were a slave, and even in our context later, well, what a slave, what that means. That a slave is someone who is serving another master rather than himself, doesn't have his own, and you're making this picture of Jesus in that concept of, in that culture, he became a slave, someone who had no will of his own, but he took that on himself, and he did it for a purpose. And he was found in human form, and he done that. He humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. He took that on himself. No one made him be that way.
Right. Yeah, the Message says became a slave. And then my footnote from my NIV side says, made himself nothing or emptied himself. He did this not by giving up deity, but laying aside his glory and submitting to the humiliation of becoming a man. Another view is that he emptied himself not of deity itself, but of its prerogatives, the high position and glory.
Oh, that's something we don't even need to get into today, is there are lots of theological arguments about what the emptied himself means for the divinity versus humanity of Jesus.
That is literally the word that you're talking about, Brian. It's kanoo, which comes from which we get kenosis, and what they're referring to is, what does kenosis mean? The whole doctrine himself.
So that's my footnote.
So it literally means to make empty, but that's, yeah, we could go on for days and days about what kenosis.
There are people who have spent their lives on that question.
Yes.
Well, any final thoughts on anything that we've talked about today? So, good message to leave with. Everybody try to understand and get along with each other. And you can't be humble if you don't believe in yourself first.
And remember when you're driving on the freeway and expressway to think of others as better than yourselves.
Yeah.
That's a message. That's a
like
message to,
or
that's
like
a
on the
message to me
airlines
too. Yeah.
when they
That's a
say,
message
you
to
know,
me as well. Yeah.
on the airlines when they remind you, you know, put your oxygen mask on first so you can help others. You know,
Yes.
you have to have something to give.
Yeah.
That is a great image to have for this.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Oh, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Airplane. That's definitely some images.
Don't call me Shirley.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great movie. That's a great movie.
All right, then, everybody. We'll see you later. Have a good one.
All right.
Take care all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.